This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Barricade 2 herbicide from FMC. Tough on weeds and gentle on your crop, Barricade 2 herbicide destroys broadleaf weeds in cereal crops. Along with powerful weed control, you can save up to 15% with the 2025 FMC Cashback Program. Visit ag.fmc.com/ca for more.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. And welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. We've got a RealAg Radio Issues Panel here today. Looking forward to it. And, of course, we will have a bonus segment for everybody listening to the RealAg Radio podcast version of the show. We'll get to, some of those things that we didn't cover. I got a long list of stuff to go through at the panel today, and it's impossible to get to it all. So that's what the bonus segment's for. So stay tuned for that if you are listening to the podcast. Today we've got Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture. We'll also be joined by Meagan Murdoch of Hill Knowlton, former press secretary for former Ag Minister Jerry Ritz. She's been on the program lots. Looking forward to her perspectives from a communications and PR perspective here today. It's going to be a great one. We got potentially an election call on Sunday. We had a very interesting conversation with the new Minister of Agriculture, Kody Blois. They got a lot of feedback on the show. Of course, we got the issue with China that is taking up a lot of the oxygen in the room in a lot of ag circles here this week. And, just a whole lot more. So it's going to be a fun one. I promise not too much March Madness talk. It is like there's a lot going on a day like yesterday and today where it's just basketball through the whole day. It is like I won't get into it because it's awesome. It's an awesome weekend of sports. I'll just say that for sure. And it's been a busy one today. I also got a chance to guest host Agri Talk in the U.S. today, which is really fun. I'm a panel every Friday. Chip Flory, the host, was off today. And so Chip asked me to be the host of the show, which was really fun. It's always great to be the host of Agri Talk when Chip can't do it. And we covered a lot of I've been broadcasting all day. Let's just say that. Lots of talking today. Lots of talking. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all of the social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call that RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. I'm going to try to weave in some of your feedback. We had a lot of feedback this week. I'm going to try to weave some of that into today's discussion and try to get to some of it. So keep it coming. Keep it coming. And encourage you, if you did miss yesterday's show, the Farmer Rapid Fire, we had a great show, some great perspectives from the farmers in terms of, hey, what makes a great ag minister? So there's something you can provide me your perspective on. Let's take a break. When we come back, we got the RealAg Issues Panel right after this.
Hi, I'm Lyndsey Smith. Joining me now is Kathy Jordison. She's the board of directors for Genesis Fertilizers. How will Genesis Fertilizers help mitigate risks related to pricing, supply chain disruption, and input costs for farmers?
What happens with an investment in Genesis is that the price going up and down won't matter so much to the farmer who's getting their fertilizer from the plant, who's actually a shareholder in the plant, because if it goes up, their profitability goes up because they get paid at the end of the year what the profit of the plant is. The other ones just benefit because there's more product available in Western Canada, so it helps mitigate the price risk. So this changes the makeup of inputs in Western Canada in that the farmers get more power. For them, they then are basically controlling one of the big plants. So it kind of allows the farmers in Western Canada to get more control over their own destiny.
That is genesisfertilizers.com. You've got all the information there on how to be involved and updates.
If you grow soy or edible beans in Ontario, you know that Sclerotinia white mold is no joke. Yield loss can be devastating, and timing fungicides can be complicated, but did you know there's a new seed treatment that can help mitigate yield loss? Start the year off with your best foot forward against disease. Ask your seed supplier or local Agrimart group to pre-treat your beans with Heads Up. Part of a complete white mold management plan, ask your seed dealer about Heads Up today or visit headsupst.com.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here for this Friday RealAg Issues Panel. Hope you're having yourself a great day. Hey, enhance your production potential and boost your bottom line by selecting reliable varieties of wheat, durum, barley, and oats from Alliance Seed. Elevate your fields at allianceseed.com, or you can also call 877-270-2890. That's 877-270-2890. Okay, let's bring in the panel. Up first, he skates much better than Prime Minister Mark Carney. It is Kelvin Heppner. Kelvin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. You haven't seen me skate, Shaun, and we had a couple kids hockey wind-up games, parents versus kids this week. So I am in top shape right now, hockey form right now, after playing a couple games against the kids.
So I have watched quite a bit of NCAA hockey. It is hard to believe that Mark Carney played NCAA hockey because
I know.
Goalie.
Bad skating.
60.
Right.
Come on.
He was a goalie, went to Harvard, but yeah, it's still his maybe his knees aren't what they used to be. It looked like after skating with the Oilers yesterday. And for those who are critical of the Oilers hosting the Prime Minister, they took another loss with the result to the Jets last night. So Winnipeg fans certainly happy today.
This happens a lot. So I think more than people are aware, there is lots of guests that show up to skate with teams. My brother-in-law, who owns the Manchester Storm and the British Elite League, they've had Justin Bieber skate at their practice before. Yeah, he's a
Whoa.
Lyndsey,
He's a big hockey guy, though.
He is
not a prime minister,
and he can skate.
He can at least skate.
Ryan
He's also young.
Ryan has a really good story where the Biebs grabbed one of the guy's sticks and started cutting it because he needed a shorter stick. Like, didn't even sort of ask. He just sort of started cutting it. So
He's the Biebs. Who needs to ask?
He is the Biebs.
Yeah.
Lyndsey Smith, coming out of Ottawa, Ontario, our nation's capital. Lyndsey, how are you?
Well, I'm well. My Elizabeth Manley days are also behind me. So I feel for Prime Minister Mark Carney because I actually got back on skates this winter after, a decade off of them. And it does come back. It is like riding a bike, but goodness, I was not nearly as nimble as I thought I was going to be. But doing better. So anyway, but yeah, it's good. It's spring, officially. I'm very happy.
It is. Official?
Yep. Yesterday was the first day.
Wait a minute. Let's bring in Meagan here as well. I got to challenge Lyndsey for a second. She has not been telling us the truth, Kelvin. Also joining us is Meagan Murdoch of Hill Knowlton out of Toronto. Meagan, it's great to have you back on the show.
Hey, everyone. Nice to see you.
Is spring in the air in Toronto?
It sure is. And we're not talking about hockey these days. It feels like it's all about March Madness in the last 24 hours.
You got your bracket figured out?
I can't say that I do. My contribution was the password to my TSN account for my colleagues in the office.
Oh, okay.
Excellent.
Well, I was guest hosting AgriTalk this morning, and I had to admit I have never heard of McNeese State, who beat Clemson yesterday, but I did just because I wanted to be able to brag if it actually came through. I had Drake over Missouri, and that was basically to brag to Tyne Morgan that because she's a Missouri grad, so I wanted to rub that in, which I have been doing all day.
It's a geographic lesson, really. Who knew that there were two teams from Alabama? Auburn?
And also,
Auburn. I did actually. There's more than two.
Sean did, but he's it.
Yeah. Auburn and Alabama. In Alabama, the heated rivals. Yeah, I'm sure all the K-State fans out there were very happy that Kansas lost to Arkansas. So we could go on and on.
Arkansas. Okay. May I just quickly, if there's a Drake, is there a Lamar? No. Okay.
There probably is a Lamar State somewhere.
See, this is what I'm saying. We could have the Beefs move all the way into there. Anyway. Okay.
Kelvin,
that's my comment.
Lyndsey is always talking about, the sheep this, the lamb that, and as if things just aren't going well. But Jay Lewitt was on the show last week, on the Farmer Rapid Fire, and all Jay could talk about was how much money there is in lamb right now. She's been She's been sandbagging.
Mm.
It's nice of you to join us here on Friday still, Lyndsey. It's very thoughtful of you to still take the time to
For all
come
the
and
little
chat.
people, I will have you know, and thank you, Mr. Lewis. But one of our issues here at Shady Creek is we are the smartest people around in that we lamb in May, which means right now we don't have anything to sell. So brilliant.
Timing is everything.
Yeah. Timing's everything. So we have not been necessarily capitalizing on these great prices. So there you go, everyone. I'm not that smart. Yeah.
Meagan, is it good retail politics for you worked for the former Ag Minister Jerry Ritz. I'm not sure if you ever took Jerry out skating with hockey teams, but is that good politics?
Well, I think it is great politics, and it almost feels like we're gearing up for an election when these kinds of, activities take place and, just the right photos are taken at the right time. It felt a little reminiscent of past playbooks as well, maybe even the former Prime Minister's playbook, because I easily recall him playing road hockey, was it? With his sleeves rolled up and with, some kids on the street. And they might be trying to find, what kind of different sides of Carney do we need to show over the next 36 days? And perhaps there's a little bit of a more approachable, softer side. I remember Stephen Harper also adorning a sweater vest and, some family photos so that, we got to see a bit of a softer side of him as well. So, yeah, it's pretty obvious as to what is about to happen here.
Well, I know this, Kelvin. The Conservatives are in trouble. If this election is called on Sunday, they're not out of it. But if this is definitely they're not a walk in the park, Kazansky, as they said in Top Gun. This is a 2-horse race.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's very likely, almost confirmed completely, that the election will be called on Sunday. And we've seen some major polls from all the big pollsters this last week that all show the Liberals now in the lead. It's not even a tie anymore. The Liberals are in the lead in terms of the polling that's happening. And I wonder whether it's also a sign, speaking to Carney's skate with the Oilers yesterday, whether he's planning to run in Edmonton. That is there's speculation that would be one place where he's going to look for a seat. He, of course, hasn't actually been elected as an MP, and he'll need to find a riding to run in. Edmonton is where he spent part of his childhood, and so it would be a logical place potentially. And maybe they were getting some of those pictures Meagan alluded to for future campaign ads, that kind of thing. The one clip I saw of him taking a shot on net, though, he flipped it. It was a light floater over the net, and I saw the comment on Twitter that maybe that was the definition of net zero right there.
Oh, how do we not have the sound effects loaded into the board?
Wah, wah.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah. There is.
You really do need to get a puck on net, though, right?
You do.
You can overshoot. There's so many good analogies here.
Yeah.
Well, the Liberals have really slew-footed the Conservatives here and taken the lead. Lyndsey, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say there's also speculation he could run here in Ottawa. We did see a prominent Liberal in one of the Ottawa ridings, which, of course, Mark Carney actually does live here. So seeing that he could be running here as well. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I've heard speculation for Toronto as well. His new chief of staff, Marco Mendocino, potentially his riding now opens up in Toronto. And, the calculation on picking a riding is very, very important. You cannot pick a riding that you may not win at the end of the day. So
doesn't look very good.
No,
exactly.
It's not a great look. And it does happen. Let's face it. So, yeah.
Well, Angus Reid has the Liberals at 42% and the Conservatives at 37%. So like Kelvin said, that's a 5 points. Now that is almost close to a 30-point swing in like less than 3 months. Kelvin, historic, is it not? Have we seen something like this ever before?
I can't recall, and I've seen a number of other people with way more experience in historical context in Canadian politics that say they haven't seen anything like this before. Of course, the only poll that counts is the one on election day. But the way things look in terms of this dramatic swing from where the Conservatives were in early January around the holiday season, 20-some point lead to now being behind. It's a huge dramatic swing, and of course, a lot of this driven by external factors. Carney isn't Trudeau, which is what Poilievre was benefiting from, the not Trudeau factor, and President Trump coming in on January 20th. And you look at the poll lines and that timeline, there's a high correlation there with what's happened. And interesting to also hear President Trump talk about the Canadian election this week and say how and try to read into what the message he's trying to send with saying he prefers dealing with a Liberal government in Canada versus a Conservative government.
Yeah, he basically said it was much easier to work with Liberals. And the Conservative guy, he doesn't say nice things about me. I don't like him. I'm paraphrasing, but
no, that was pretty close.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you make of it, Lyndsey? Is Trump trying to help out Poilievre, or does he actually just like working with Liberals better?
I don't think that he would in any way, shape, or form want to help anyone in Canada. I'll be very blunt on that one. At the same time, I think my question is exactly that, who does it help, right? So, and it sort of does depend on what way you look at it, right? So if you're someone who is, incredibly angry and can't stand Trump, etc., and you want someone to go up against him, you might think, perfect, I want Mark Carney because they're going to get along. Or maybe you think the other way. You're like, good, he doesn't like Poilievre. I don't like Trump, so I want somebody who Trump doesn't like. Like, you can argue it both ways. So it kind of does depend on, as the individual and how you look at it, whether or not this is an endorsement of either. Go ahead, Kelvin.
One of the big differentiation points, though, between Poilievre and Carney so far is that Canadians feel Carney won't cave in to Trump as much as Poilievre will. And of course, the Liberals have spent a lot of time and continue to spend time comparing Poilievre to Trump and accusing him of having Trump characteristics in his politics. Of course, he isn't Trump. Trump even said that this week, that he doesn't really care for some of the things that Poilievre had said. But that is one of the differentiation points. And Canadians right now are feeling like Carney is this managerial, custodial type personality, calm, cool, management oriented, not a great charismatic speaker, not a rally the troops kind of guy, just look after things kind of guy, and that seems to be playing into the Liberals' favor right now, giving them this momentum.
Yeah, Meagan, let's wrap up this segment. You got the final word.
Yeah, I think if this was 6 months ago, right, and Trudeau had stepped down sooner and Carney had gone in to be the leader sooner, I think we'd be looking at very different polls. I actually don't think he would be as successful in that environment where we were, where the topics were all around affordability. It's really hard to see him understanding the affordability challenges of the common Canadian. This tariff situation has completely created an environment where he is suddenly, a very compelling option. And Kelvin, you said maybe he's the one who will get along better with Trump. But I think a lot of Canadians are looking at the resumes and, their kind of global interactions, their global trade experience, their global negotiation, and seeing Carney as a more capable negotiator with Trump, not necessarily someone that he would like as much. But it's all about momentum, right? What will happen in the next 36 days is anyone's guess. Anything can happen. I've been in several elections where the tides have changed very, very quickly. There's not a lot of focus on Poilievre right now. Parliament is not sitting. There's not enough, there's not as much media attention or media opportunities for him. He's also one to be on the ground versus trying to communicate through the media. So, I think it's anyone's guess what might happen in the next 36 days.
Interesting indeed. It like in the world of business or anything else, timing is everything. Hey, don't put your yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands cannot match. See the difference at defendyourn.com. We'll be right back with more of RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after this.
Growing corn? With Envita, you can cut your nitrogen and maintain yield, or maintain nitrogen and increase yield. Envita takes nitrogen from the air and turns it into nitrogen for your corn. It provides a right place, right time source of nitrogen to maximize your yield. Farmers who use Envita see healthier plants, bigger cobs, and less tipback. Envita is guaranteed to add more bushels to every treated acre. Start growing with Envita. Visit azotic.com to learn more. That's AZOTIC.com.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Fill up with your local co-op this seeding season. With full tanks, you can avoid the rush and start your field work at the earliest moment possible. Like, it's sort of like you're gonna go out and, for the day on a drive. You're gonna go maybe to the neighboring city. It's like a 2-hour drive for a hockey tournament. It's like, oh, we need to fill up with gas. Well, seeding season can be delayed that way as well. Hey, the spring early delivery program, you can save time and free up cash flow. Receive early on-farm delivery of high-quality fuels and delay billing at participating co-ops. Talk to your local co-op fuel team member today to arrange an early on-farm delivery and ensure you are fueled up for seeding season. Okay, we got Meagan Murdoch from Hill Knowlton of Toronto, Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith of Real Agriculture. One of the interviews that we did this week that created a lot of feedback from the audience was the interview with the new Minister of Agriculture, Kody Blois. Lyndsey, I think it's such a difference whether you agree with liberal policies or you're a staunch conservative. What everybody seemed to notice in the feedback was, this is not Lawrence Macaulay and this is not Marie-Claude Bobeau, and I like it.
Mm-hmm. And it is refreshing, I think, for most of us in the agriculture industry to have somebody who seems to not just care, but actually want to do something. And so Minister Blois in his week has been incredibly busy. We've seen directives sent off to CFIA, several of them now, and another one came through today. And Kelvin can maybe talk about that one. But the feedback I'm getting as well, and I mean, most people, and Minister Blois has been on this show before, chair of the Standing Committee on Agriculture. He's quite well known to all parties, really, and known that, he has been involved in the agriculture sector and actually cares. And I think that, that is abundantly clear that he's somebody who wants to do something. Now, there's also, as we talked about in the last segment, likely an election call coming on Sunday, which means they do have a very short amount of time, as government to do a couple things. And so definitely saw that, and are seeing that this week. At the same time, if the polls end up being accurate, perhaps this is more long-term. So I will say, yes, I'm getting a lot of feedback that people appreciate that he's actually engaged. He seems to actually know who everybody is, who he should be talking to, and actually is moving some things forward. And there are things that organizations, different commodity groups, et cetera, have been pushing for, and he's actually seeing them through. So it is definitely a change, a 180 from the last minister for sure, and just a different approach. I think Minister
the one
Bebo
before as well.
She had Minister Bebo. I think the perspective was a bit different in that she had sort of, from government, here's the ideas we're going to bring to ag. Whereas I think Minister Blois is very much, here's the things in agriculture that we're going to move forward through government. It is a different direction, I think.
And one thing is what we're seeing at the top level that we also saw in the interview that Minister Blois did is there's an opportunity here for the Liberals to I don't know, borrow, take, some would say steal, some of the things that the Conservatives were intending to do. I think a lot of the things, there's probably, Kelvin, you can run through some of the highlights, but the list that Minister Blois went through, those are probably things we would have heard from Ag Minister John Barlow if the Conservatives were to win the next election.
Yeah, a lot of it so far, because it is low-hanging fruit, and it begs the question of, if this is low-hanging fruit, why hasn't this been done for the last 10 years? But that's a lot of what he's dealt with here in this first week that Lyndsey's referring to, and a lot of that would be the same cutting red tape type stuff that Barlow and the Conservatives would have been looking to do as well. So you're right. And I think Kody is more on the blue liberal side of the spectrum in terms of small c conservative fiscal approach to policy. And so, yeah, I think the ambition that we're seeing from the Ag Minister is something we haven't seen in many years, since maybe Meagan's boss was the Ag Minister, and Kody talked about it in the interview. He is the youngest Ag Minister in Canada's history, and it certainly brings fresh perspective and strong communication skills, like we've talked to. The proof will still be in the pudding whether he can address some of the big issues, such as the tariffs with that China put into effect this week on Canadian canola meal and peas and oil, pork, seafood as well, and also what his rank would be in cabinet in terms of getting things through a cabinet process. Right now, he's mainly dealt with regulatory files that, as minister, he can issue directives on. There are also not clear timelines in terms of implementation of some of the changes that he announced this week, such as the BSE feed requirement that has been a longstanding issue for the cattle sector. There was also, Lyndsey alluded to the announcement that came out most recently that has to do with spent fowl. That's something the chicken industry that I also work in has been calling on the federal government to deal with this. I heard this morning for 14 years they've been lobbying for this change that he has pushed through in his first week as the Ag Minister. And so that type of work it's refreshing to see. And again, whether we have a Conservative Ag Minister or a Liberal Ag Minister after the election, I'd say things look pretty strong in terms of Blois potentially taking that Ag Minister role if Carney and the Liberals would win the election, as the polls are indicating could happen.
Yeah, I got a bunch of different feedback. Here's an email from Dan who says, "At last, we have a Minister of Agriculture that I might become proud of. Excellent job interviewing Kody Blois today. I hope you will be able to keep the lines of communication open." Yeah, he's always available. Meagan, I saw you chuckling. What are you smirking and laughing about over there?
I had to really bite my tongue not to jump in there when Lyndsey was talking about how refreshing this new minister is. Can we just all agree that he has said he has ambition? He hasn't actually really done anything. He's to the point on directives. He's sent a few emails, everyone.
Yeah.
Wow.
I agree, but the bar is really low, unfortunately.
I appreciate that.
Yes.
But maybe I'm so cynical. But I watched your interview, Shaun. Great interview, may I say. However, it was like nails on a chalkboard. Comments like, I'm here to create a culture. I'm really focused on getting things done. What has been happening under this government previously? It's unfortunate that maybe he is taking my heat on this one, but oh my gosh, red tape, low-hanging fruit a decade in, it's aggravating to say the least. And I think, Kelvin, you're right. He may have ambition, but what standing at the cabinet table will he have? He himself said that he is the youngest Ag Minister. He is from Nova Scotia, which, the Atlantic would not necessarily have the loudest voice at the cabinet table. He is an easy choice, I would say. He does get along with a lot of caucus. He is kind of, a nice guy. But is he going to be someone like Jerry Ritz who really, kicks up a fuss when things don't happen? I don't know that he was the choice because, he's got really opinionated views as to what should happen in the agriculture industry. It's just, it was a lot. It's been a week. You can say a lot of things. I am in the industry of public relations and communications. He said the right things, though I would question the government broadly. He hasn't actually done very much yet. So can we just
so this has been the government for 10 years. And so it's like, where was all of this for the last 10 years? I'm right there with you.
And he didn't acknowledge that at all.
But
and I mean, he couldn't have, but
he would have to
throw
thrown Macaulay under the bus, and that there is some politeness involved here too.
Yeah. Even in our comments here, there's a politeness that we are screening, I would say, some of our comments as to making this comparison as well. So I'm not sure that those are all fair questions and things that need to be answered in the coming months if the Liberals stay in power. But I'm not sure. I think a lot of that criticism, Meagan, goes to his predecessors and his
100%.
peers in the Liberal caucus.
I just would have appreciated maybe some acknowledgement.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. But
hasn't been done.
But Meagan, this is working for the Liberals. Think about the election in general. Canadians are willing to totally forget about the last 10 years, and this is going to be a version of the same. How is that any different than what you're saying at the micro level of agriculture?
What I will give him is that I appreciated his recognition that he needs to be an ag minister for all of Canadian producers. And he rightly recognized that, Shaun, a lot of your listeners are Western based, and he needs to represent their views as well. He did recognize at one point that potentially under the previous prime minister, agriculture was not given its due. We'll just have to wait and see if that's the case under a future Liberal government as well. But Kelvin, I would question whether there was any other choice that could have been made as well in cabinet. I think he was the only choice.
Got an email here from Gary who says, hey, Kody, the new ag minister, he's from Manitoba. Kody, the new ag minister, knows how to talk, so I guess we'll see how he walks. Canada needs a new government in the near future because, in my opinion, we are getting more of the same with Carney. Lyndsey, final word.
So, and I think Meagan really outlines it exactly that on a micro level for agriculture, but on a macro level, what has been, I think, very surprising for many of us who have been following along is that, most of Carney's cabinet, albeit smaller, is the same as what Trudeau had. So he got rid of some people, but it's 87% the same people. It is a new leader who hasn't held a seat yet. We got that. But realistically, a lot of the key players that have been leading Canada for the last 10 years are the same. And somehow, en masse, as Canadians, we're kind of like wiping the slate clean because there's a new leader. And I don't know if that's entirely fair. I, for one, am really glad we're going to have an actual race here. But it means to me that both parties, Conservatives and Liberals, need to bring their A game. You can't just rest on, slogans, etc. Let's have a race and let's do what's best for Canada. Whatever that may be.
It's going to be for us political followers, it is going to be. Honestly, last 10 years aside, I listened to the messaging. He kind of reminded me a little bit of Brooke Rollins. Action, going to do this, whether you agree or disagree, let's move. And that is not what we have been hearing out of AFC for quite some time. So, and looking forward to seeing. He's got a tight race himself. Kody Blois in his riding.
Always.
He's got a conservative threat there. So we'll see what that all looks like. Hey, maximize productivity and profitability with an innovative all-in-one approach to farming, combining accounting, business planning, agronomic field planning, and advanced technology. M&P Ag Intellect delivers personalized solutions that empower you to make confident, data-driven decisions. Just go to mmp.ca to find out more. We got more coming up here on the RealAg Issues Panel right after this.
Find everything you need for outstanding weed control in your wheat and barley from the cross-spectrum herbicide experts at Corteva. Corteva is proud to offer a wide selection of cross-spectrum herbicides for maximum convenience, effective resistance management, and customized control of your toughest grassy and broadleaf weeds. No matter what kind of weed challenges you're experiencing, we've got the right fit for your farm. Visit corteva.ca to learn more.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, The Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
And we are back here on RealAg Radio. We got Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture, Meagan Murdoch of Hill Knowlton, and we're covering the biggest issues of the week. Hey, listen. Pay attention here, Western Canadian farmers. With volatile markets and rising costs, now's your chance to be a part of the solution. We need solutions at a time like this. It's time to secure your future with Genesis Fertilizers. Gain control and ensure access to locally produced nitrogen. Act now to protect your farm's future for generations. Visit genesisfertilizers.com to learn more. Okay, let's get after it. One of the big solutions, speaking of solutions, that keeps on getting mentioned, we heard it from Minister Blois in our interview this week. I was in a meeting yesterday, some non-ag people. I heard all about how getting rid of these interprovincial trade barriers is going to be our key, our path to success, especially with all the, trade partners abroad don't want to deal with us, but maybe interprovincially we do. Meagan, what's your thoughts on this as a solution?
Yeah, I mean, it's great actually to see a lot more attention paid to this issue. It was certainly something that the former government and former Agriculture Minister Jerry Ritz really tried to make progress on. Stems from extremely, extremely old legislation. I remember some of it dating back to 1908, like Liquor Act. That just makes a lot of trade between our own provinces really, really difficult. So great overall that it's getting more attention. It's not an easy fix, however, because if it was, I'm sure governments over the last 10, 20 years would have made a lot more progress on it. It's very, very complicated depending on the commodity. But potentially this gives us all more impetus to try to figure it out. It was interesting to see Angus Reid come out with a survey this morning, with some fresh data, asking Canadians, what do they think, are the products that are, subject to interprovincial trade barriers. Not surprisingly, Canadians resoundingly knew that alcohol was one of them, with 78% saying alcohol. Dairy products was the second one, which I thought was really interesting. And all the way down to toilet seats. So 12% of Canadians polled knew that toilet seats are regulated provincially, and that forces, that makes moving them across borders very challenging, apparently.
Is there
facts for everyone today?
I was just trying to come up with a quick joke about how we're in the shitter, but I was having a hard time. I did not know this.
I didn't know about the toilet seats either till today.
Yeah, and work boots probably for this audience. Interesting. Yeah. Work boots are regulated provincially, so can make it challenging to order some from a different province, or at least order them in bulk. I'm sure personal use is fine.
Kelvin, can you make sense of all this? That the work boot one. What are we doing?
Yeah, I don't know how that came to be, and a lot of this doesn't make sense. And like Meagan said, hopefully there's impetus to streamline a lot of this. But in the same sense, I do think some of the model-based estimates as to how much this could benefit the Canadian economy in terms of GDP are overrated, because a lot of these rules, there are good reasons for. Trucking is often referred to, and there's a reason why trucks in British Columbia, when you're driving through the Rockies, have to have different rules than trucks in Saskatchewan or here in Manitoba, in the flattest part of the world. Don't need the same braking systems. You're not dealing with the same issues. So to me, there's different factors across the country where different rules need to account for different scenarios. So some of that's where we get to, though, when we zoom in, move from that 50,000 foot view down to the 20,000 foot view, and you start to realize that, hang on, there's a reason why some of these rules are in effect, and maybe we should keep them. So that's where I'm not sure that this is the huge solution to all our trade issues with the U.S. and China that we think, and I think a lot of Canadians also just don't understand the amount of exports that we produce, especially in agriculture, and that there is no backyard market that is going to take all that canola oil that we ship to China, that type of thing.
And you say the rules that are in effect for good reason. Even just think of the rules that are in effect for no good reason. fixing those rules will require a lot of investment in some places in order to come up to a minimum standard. And that in itself is challenging, would put, meat processors, for instance, out of business if they actually had to try to come up to some national standard, because the rules aren't
in some provinces.
In some provinces. Well, and the flip side is thinking about it, and I use the example, alcohol is a good one. In Newfoundland, those rules actually protect beer being made in Newfoundland, right? So you can't bring in, the only reason you have a brewery in Newfoundland is because the beer has to come from Newfoundland to be sold there. You can't just bring it in. So some of these rules are in place to maintain local economies. And so we have to understand that there's a reason that provinces have fought against removing some of these trade barriers, because it wouldn't necessarily be good politics at home. So all of this to say there's two parts to this. One is that we have some of these rules for a reason, and we can't just willy-nilly just make them all go away. I think there are strategic ones that make sense. Things like, our healthcare system, having people being able to work within different jurisdictions, that should be something we can actually manage. Even the trucking thing, we should be able to find some sort of common, middle of the road here, where we remove some of the red tape, but we don't eliminate all the differences. But the key here that I think has been sort of smashed into this conversation is that the whole point of the removing of international trade barriers isn't to somehow fix the trade issues. It's that it's a productivity gain that we have to use to offset what we're losing with U.S. tariffs. And that is a tiny piece of the puzzle. That is not the only piece of the puzzle, but it has been blown to this panacea, it's going to fix everything. No, we still have to deal with trade. We still have to deal with these tariffs. Interprovincial trade is not going to suddenly solve all these problems.
And what we continue to prove, Canada is more interested in protecting than productivity.
Yes.
And we talk about competitiveness, but we actually, I don't know if I'm really that interested. I mean, I'm not going to I'm a brewery in New Brunswick, and I'm not going to, I don't want to that. I don't want that beer from Ontario coming here.
So if I may, competitive advantage at the end of the day, right? Where can products be made most efficiently, better, in more affordable way, right? That is the virtue of international trade. And it is at a micro level, the virtue of interprovincial trade.
We're not interested.
If the beer is better coming from Nova Scotia, Newfoundlanders might buy the Nova Scotian beer. But if the beer is just fantastic and, makes for a very amazing, kitchen party in St. John's, then they will continue to buy the Newfoundland beer, right? Mm-hmm. But I think we're all a little bit nervous that, and wine is a really good example. If Ontario and British Columbia's trade was, those trade barriers were removed, whose wine would win?
Well, we all know this. For those of us, if you're going to bring wine back from, say, Montana or Idaho, you know this. You do not cross at British Columbia. You cross at Alberta. That is well known in these parts. Okay, we got to take a break. We've got more coming up here on the RealAg Issues Panel right after this.
If you're applying a low-rate end stabilizer, you might be falling for a losing strategy. Low-rate products promise great results, but may lack the potency of higher active ingredient concentrations, so great isn't always what you get. Don't put yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvol Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Hey, you need livestock tags? Well, I'm sure you do. Get them fast and hassle-free through CCIA's online web store. Shop approved tags for beef cattle and pre-approved tags for goats and cervids, and a variety of options all in one place. Order online 24/7. Like if you're up like a Saturday night, you're up at 3 a.m., order some tags. Like all you got to do is visit tags.canadaid.ca. That's CANADAID.ca, your trusted source for traceability. Okay, let's talk about, with our group here, about trade war with China. And Meagan, we're hearing a lot of Canadian farmers say, lift the EV tariffs because we want to sell canola. Is it that simple?
It is not. It is not. And I mean, it only takes looking at the last, 10, 15 years of trade of canola with China to tell you that, because I remember working with Jerry Ritz on issues with canola and China. So, if the tariffs weren't here, would China still be, as welcoming to Canadian canola? I would argue no. And of course, then what would the ramifications of lifting the EV tariff be in terms of, trade with the US? Would it be even worse? So it's not as easy as that, unfortunately.
Kelvin, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. You can't operate in a world of what ifs, but certainly if we're hoping to keep our auto industry and a lot of that business integrated with the U.S. auto industry and not have it isolated, this is to lift the EV tariffs on China would certainly provoke a reaction from the Trump administration on that. So the actual EV industry is hardly developed in Canada, and we're seeing it in financial trouble as well with some of these companies going under. But it would be nice if there was some action though, and if we saw some sign of negotiations happening. The tariffs took effect as of yesterday. And I know some commodity groups were hoping that the announcement of the tariffs by China about 2 weeks ago was just a starting point for negotiations, that Canada would, that there would be a back and forth and that there could be some trading happening here in terms of bartering different policies and taking different positions. But we've seen no sign of that. It's been absolutely quiet from both the Canadian and Chinese government sides in terms of any discussions happening or even talk of the potential movement in position on either side. And so, yeah, I again also wonder whether the Chinese, we often in commodity market talk refer to China as doing these types of things so that they can buy cheap, that type of thing. And there might be some of that strategic stuff happening behind the scenes too, because they still haven't put any tariffs on actual seed from Canada. Maybe they want Canadian canola seed and they just don't want the processed products, which hurts our domestic crushers and hurts our domestic prices. And maybe they're buying canola cheap right now. I'm not sure, but that type of thing could be happening behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, kind of caught in the middle here again, Lyndsey. Sort of like being sort of squeezed. We're like a fresh orange.
We're like a canola seed going through a cold crush.
Like a canola seed being pressed into meal and oil. Yes, and the tough part here is that we could remove the EV tariff, sure, and China might not change anything. That's the other what if, right? So I mean, this is, I think, the most difficult part of this entire conversation is this isn't a 1 or 0, an on or off. This is a very complicated, very multifaceted discussion, and we're dealing with, the interplay between China and the U.S. We're dealing with our own diplomatic relations with China, our own trade, et cetera. And Kelvin's bang on. I mean, China does things like this all the time to potentially just be able to go in, buy what they need at a lower price, and then turn around and, hey, maybe they take the tariffs off, but they've got what they need, so they just move on. Like, we're not dealing on a level playing field here, and we're also not necessarily dealing from a position of strength, and that is very difficult. So as much as I agree that, we need canola to move, we don't want these tariffs, et cetera, at the same time, even removing the EV tariff may not solve this. So we have to be cognizant of that.
Well, and as much as Canadians are having a hard time trusting this U.S. administration, I don't know what planet we're living on that we think that, hey, let's go trust China.
Yeah. And what we know for sure about China is that they do not negotiate in public. And stomping your feet and, raising your voice through media does not help the situation. So I think Kelvin is right to suggest that there's probably a lot of conversation that's happening behind closed doors. And for the sake of the canola industry, I think that's where it needs to stay as well.
A lot of people are talking about the former USTR Robert Lighthizer, his interview, hour and a half podcast with Tucker Carlson on his X show. I've listened to it all because, I just don't got better things to do. But I know Kelvin listened to it as well. Kelvin, it's good insight into what the strategy is or what the mindset is, trying to get into the, I guess, on the inside of what the Trump administration's up to.
Yeah, a bit of a broken record here, but I do think that people should read Robert Lighthizer's book, even though it means maybe a little bit of financial proceeds go to him.
Are you getting kickbacks?
No, I'm not.
And Kelvin is getting kickbacks.
I have it in Shaun Haney's book club. I've been talking. gave a presentation today where I said you got to read it. Got to read it.
And listening to this interview is a good summary, and even I think he updates some of his thoughts in terms of philosophy on trade. The problem is almost, I would say, 95% of what Lighthizer says is very factually arguable. Like there's strong counter arguments to what he says. Yeah. It's quite unfortunate that the world's largest economy is being run off of ideology and philosophy that is so poorly misinformed when it comes to talking about trade deficits and not understanding how trade works, I would say. And I don't know, maybe I've learned a different school of economics type of thinking, but it's unfortunate that but I think it makes sense that as Canadians we should be listening to it because it explains what the Trump administration is trying to accomplish with the massive approach to tariffs. And of course, April 2nd around the corner in terms of the reciprocal tariffs, and apparently that's going to be the largest wave that we've seen to date. So,
yeah, I think if there's one thing Canadians aren't doing enough of, it's not spending enough time trying to understand what, like, the other side of this. Not to say you have to agree with it, but just trying to understand.
Yeah.
I think that's been a little bit of a gap.
It's frustrating though, because it's
I was going to say it's not any less infuriating, but at least you sort of know where it's all coming from. But it's still infuriating. But it does at least provide some insight into the thought process, as flawed as it is. Also, hats off to you, Shaun, for listening to Tucker Carlson. Can't do it.
It's a good interview. No.
I'm sure it is. And I'm so glad you watched it, so I don't have
I listened to a very wide swath of stuff.
You do. You also, so I would, peeling back the curtain a little, the behind the scenes, Shaun, and I quote, said this week, I need to get a life. After so many interviews.
I listened to the full press conference of Fed Chairman Powell, which was very... And,
he leads a very exciting life, everybody.
Yeah.
Super exciting.
The U.S. didn't cut rates this week, Kelvin, as expected.
Yeah, didn't cut. Canada did last week, and expecting maybe a pause with the next decision here in Canada, but further cuts later this
February inflation numbers ticking up again with the removal of the tax holiday. So it's a watching brief on that side of things.
Hey, we're going to wrap up here on Rural Radio. We got a short bonus segment. In the bonus segment today, we're going to get to what is the one story from each of our panelists that we didn't talk about here today on the show. So I encourage you to hang with us.
There's some big ones. Last week had a lot happen.
Okay, well, there you go. So you got to listen to the RealAg Radio podcast. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. We'll chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast brought to you by Barricade 2 Herbicide from FMC. 2 modes of action, a wide application window, and outstanding recropping flexibility make Barricade 2 Herbicide the right choice for cereal growers. Plus, you can save up to 15% with the 2025 FMC Cashback Program. Visit ag.fmc.com/ca today.
A little disappointed in the regular show on Rural Radio. We didn't get to enough March Madness talk. I feel like that was undercovered today. What's wrong, Lyndsey?
It was not. The amount of March Madness talk was enough.
You think it was
more
adequate?
Than enough. Yeah, Meagan agrees with me. It was adequate. Yeah, that was enough.
I mean, there is like a sports ratio that these panels do require. I mean, we haven't talked about the Jays, which are, that season is upon us. So maybe that's an area where we could delve into on a future week. But I feel like at this point, March Madness is good.
Yeah. We're covered.
Well, Kelvin,
Okay.
have you seen the number that the Jays look to be willing to sign Vlad at?
It's a gong
Sorry,
show.
Lyndsey.
Yeah, I don't know.
Meagan, why did you do this?
I wouldn't do it. I would not sign him at that.
No,
What
I'm
did he
in
do
the camp
last
as well.
season?
And the navigation of how they've gone about this in terms of PR and all of that is Meagan could speak to that too. But it's disappointing, and they haven't not setting themselves up well here for the 25 season and re-signing Bo Bichette and all that. But speaking of things that
hold on here. Wait 1 second. We'll get to number one rule. If you listen to the fans, eventually you'll be sitting with them. And that is pretty much the Blue Jays.
Don't be condescending and insulting to them. That's There's a middle ground there.
I have one more email I didn't get to read on the air, and then we'll get to your stories that we didn't cover. Email from Tim, farms in North Dakota. I hear from him all the time. Big U Mary supporter. My oldest son goes to the University of Mary, so he farms outside of Bismarck. He actually listened to the Blois interview, and what he had to say was, and he listens to the show all the time, hey, back in the shop this week listening to podcasts of your interviews with Kody Blois. Started out great. I thought he had some great thoughts on dealing with the current situation, but at the end he lost any sense of being willing to work with any other party than his own to provide solutions. He totally lost me when he went on a crude tirade about the solutions that the Conservatives proposed no compromise on. He seems to be cut from the same cloth as Chrystia Freeland, liberals who believe they know what's best for the commoner in Canada. So appreciate that email, Tim, and thanks for listening to the show all the time. Okay, Kelvin, what story did we not get to?
There's this little thing I think some people have heard about, carbon tax. I think. Well, it wasn't eliminated. It's still, the legislation's still in effect, but it was set at 0. And so, the carbon tax, it's hard to believe how quickly the news cycle is moving these days, that the fact that we saw basically the end of the carbon tax, at least for now in Canada at the consumer level, the one that farmers pay on propane and natural gas. And we didn't mention that, even though it's something we've talked about a lot over the last 5-8 years kind of time frame.
They just put it to 0. Do you believe that there's a chance it would come back?
I hear there's a shadow one coming.
A shadow?
Yeah. The industrial carbon tax, or the output-based pricing system, is remaining in effect under the Carney government. He said he would maintain it and even enhance it. Meanwhile, Poilievre announced this week on Monday, it's a question that we've been wondering, what would a Conservative government do with the industrial carbon tax? And this applies to fertilizer manufacturers, oil and gas companies, the big emitters. And so Poilievre said this week, he confirmed that the Conservatives would also lift the industrial carbon tax. The Liberals say they're going to enhance it and keep it. And so that's where there is still a tax that will be passed on to consumers, to the consumer level across Canada. If and farmers, for example, if fertilizer companies continue to face it, that cost will be passed on. So from an economics perspective, there is a shadow tax that will remain in effect. Right now, it's just a matter of regulation that it's set at 0. The legislation hasn't been repealed. There hasn't been an opportunity to do that because Parliament hasn't been sitting. So it would be a test if a Liberal government comes to power, if they would actually move to repeal that part of the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Act, because that would be definitely a much more permanent solution. And we saw farm groups this week, including the Ag Carbon Alliance, actually call for that, some permanent legislative certainty when it comes to the future of the carbon tax.
Canadians seem, again, like we're
pretty shallow.
Yeah, willing to take the risk, though.
Yeah. Same with the capital gains inclusion rate changes that Carney announced today.
Yeah.
Scoop me.
Lyndsey, what did we not cover?
I'll leave the capital gains one for Meagan. We Doug Ford, my and Meagan's premier, did name his new cabinet this week.
My goodness gracious. Who's moderating this panel?
Who is running this, Shaun Haney?
The host sucks.
So Rob Flack is out as Minister of Agriculture, OMAFA, as I like to call it, and Trevor Jones is in. So he's from the Leamington area, I believe, so way down south. And so he's in. So that was newsworthy this week.
Trevor Jones. It sounds like a hard-throwing lefty out of the bullpen, Kelvin.
Probably is.
I was saying, sounds like a Canadian CFL star, Trevor Jones.
Jones.
He's like a tight end lining up there.
He's the cousin of Kahari. Yeah. There you go.
So big promotion though for Rob Flack, right? Is that it would be a promotion?
And he was previously the Associate Minister of Housing, so it wasn't as surprising that he got named the Minister of Housing this time. But yeah, very nice man, very, committed to whatever is on his plate. So good to see him moved into a portfolio that is so important.
I think agriculture is a bit bummed.
Yeah.
The industry quite liked.
He was liked.
Because yes, Rob Flack is very well liked. He, of course, has a very storied history with the agriculture industry. He's worked in his corporate life. So he will be missed. But it is true. I mean, not entirely surprising he'd be promoted because he's doing very well and is well liked and has that background that I think the Ford government was looking for. So, so a new ag minister here for Ontario.
There's one thing to be like, get the portfolio you want, where you're like, yes, like I am very interested in ag, or I'm very interested in trade or economic, where you're like, yes, can wrap my arms around this. Mm-hmm. And then there's like where you get dumped into a portfolio, you're like, I have no interest in this one.
It happens.
It does happen. Does it happen more than we think, Meagan?
I don't actually think so. I think anyone named to cabinet is, pleased as punch to be there. And
pay raise.
Yeah, pay raise. It's a limited number that are selected. Provincially, it's probably a little easier to get into cabinet. Federally, as we saw with the smaller cabinet under this government, finding that regional representation, getting the gender representation, getting the interest right. Like if you are selected as one of those, you're just happy to be there. I think. But they obviously do try to choose wisely. They want people that do have a background in it, do have interest in it, do have a passion for it. So that's always taken into consideration, I think. But I don't think anyone would turn their nose up at one if they were selected.
Kelvin?
I was just going to say, Meagan mentioned gender representation, and evidently it's not 2015 anymore with the Carney cap.
It is not.
Oh, what's the breakdown? I didn't even pay attention to that.
It's not 50-50.
Not 50-50. And that was, of course, where Trudeau gave that because it's 2015.
Because it's 2015. Yeah. It's not 50-50, but yes, definitely regionally not as representative. But again, I think everybody knew that this cabinet would be very short-lived. So perhaps the regional representation part wasn't as important as having the ministers in place that will deal with the government business while we are in an election. So, yeah.
I can't find it in my string of emails and feedback from the audience, but on this cabinet makeup, I had a couple emails from the audience very upset. How does based on what Blois said, not to go back to that and rehash this, but how is this guy not been the minister for the past 2 years? Like that, I also heard that reaction a lot as well from even the most, one of the people was one of the most conservative people.
It's a complicated calculation to try to put a cabinet together and hit all those numbers and hit, even the seniority of those that have been in your cabinet for years and language. And, there's so many calculations that go into it that, and the Atlantic being somewhat smaller, right? There's not as many that are selected from the Atlantic.
Okay, Meagan, what story did we not cover?
Well, I think at the time of recording, this story came out because this week there have been many announcements made. Surprisingly, the government has been, I think, more active than they've been in many years. I think maybe because there's an election coming, but we'll put that aside. But today it was announced that the current government will cancel the proposed hike in the capital gains inclusion rate. So this was something that has been debated fiercely for at least the last year. And they finally announced that they will indeed cancel something that they proposed in the first place. And they did say at the same time that the increase in the lifetime capital gains exemption limit to 1.25 million on the sale of small business shares and farming and fishing property will remain in place. So that'll be important for your listeners.
Kelvin, what's your take on that one?
Carney's been promising to do this since the Liberal leadership campaign. But again, it's another example of where something that the Liberals, as recently as a couple months ago, were saying needed to happen, and this change was extremely important for the future of Canada and that type of thing. You can lump the carbon tax in with this. There's other policies as well where there's certainly been a pivot, and it remains to be seen, again, whether Canadians go for this or whether we see this as convenient politicking and whether this is something that they will actually follow through on if we give them another election mandate.
You know, Lyndsey, what you didn't do today is give us some maple syrup update. It's like
I know
it's as
you
regular
can't wait.
as USDA's crop progress reports.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so it really does depend on where you are in the province, but it will likely be a relatively short run here in the east, except we were a little concerned it would be incredibly short because we had a pretty significant warm up, but the weather has turned back a bit colder, which is what you need for maple syrup. You need sort of those sunny, warm 6 to 9 degree days and then going down -2, -3 overnight to really get
in a gradual way as well.
That's right. Yeah. And the sun, the sun is really important. So we're going to have a bit more of a run here to go, which is good because it looked like it was going to be really short. So there's that. And it is the most delicious time of year. That is true. Even though Shaun doesn't like maple syrup. And that's fine because I don't like Rush. So we all have our Canadian flaws, and that is one of yours, and I have mine. So
I'm comfortable enough in my own skin to talk about
That's
it.
right.
I could have sat here and hit it, and
you did for like a decade, but other than that, like it's fine.
Damn you, Tyne Morgan! Damn you!
Damn you!
You don't like Tim Hortons coffee either, then, Shaun?
So
that is correct.
To be told, I do not.
Ow!
It's okay. Tim Hortons is owned by Americans. It's fine.
It's owned by
Brazilians. Sorry. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
I if you were to put in so you got Starbucks, McDonald's, and Tim Hortons. The taste Tim Hortons is about the third in my mind. But it's personal choice. I'm not like you can do whatever. The donuts are great.
Submit your passport to us. We will take it off your hands.
Yeah.
You know what? What I appreciate about Tim Hortons coffee is it's always hot. My knock against McDonald's coffee is that sometimes it's not hot.
Well,
I would say
the taste is fine.
They got sued a couple times. Probably that's a bit of a deterrent.
Yeah, that's right. It says caution hot on there. But yeah, it's not hot.
Why not you? McDonald's, like, okay, so in this whole buy Canadian thing, is there like a food restaurant chain that buys more Canadian product than McDonald's Canada? So, like, I had a buddy earlier this week says, I'm not going to McDonald's anymore. Forget it. I'm going to Tim Hortons. Okay, well, not McDonald's. Like, look at all the advertising. McDonald's Canada buys a lot of Canadian farm products. So, like, like, what is actually our objective here?
Mm-hmm. I know, but we all have to feel like the one thing I will totally get behind, because honestly, the buying of food products is very complicated because we have integrated supply chains. I know that's a swear word, but whatever. But what I can totally get behind is how many people have changed their travel plans out of the U.S. to other places. But may I recommend staying in Canada? We have a phenomenal amount of geographic regions that probably most of you have not seen all of them. This is the year that you should. So that's my plug.
Yeah, I was just looking at a local paper here in Toronto, and right at the top of the app, it says Canadian owned, and their travel section has been dominated by Canadian options lately. You know, I kind of like that. You can stick the label on, but they're actually providing content that is more Canadian as well.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
The Globe actually had a story this week about Americans deciding to make it to travel to Canada.
Mm-hmm. Dollar is really helpful.
Dollar is helpful.
But some of the interviews they did in the story were very much around Americans wanted to show support for the way that Canada is being treated. But that's how they were showing their support, was they were going to vacation in Canada.
They are welcome. Come on down. It's great. Really nice in July.
I think it's and Kelvin and I both live pretty close to the border. It's the border tourism and the border towns where this is where it really hurts.
Yeah, there was some new data this week too in terms of border crossings from Canada into the U.S. and and the numbers are by ground, and the numbers I believe were down 250,000 on the month in terms of crossings. So there is a significant difference, and that was February data, of course, when the threat of tariffs was hanging over the Canadian economy. The tariffs weren't in effect yet, but yeah, it'll be interesting to watch how much that impacts behavior.
And before we get all too self-righteous and all this, there is lots of Canadian tourism needs American visitors.
We do. That's what I'm saying. They're welcome.
The Calgary Stampede, like the last thing the Calgary Stampede needs is a boycott from American cowboys and tourists coming up for the Stampede. That'd be disastrous. Like,
well, and you talked about McDonald's buying Canadian product. They also employ Canadians. So think about all the employees that are supported through the Stampede, right? The hotels, the restaurants, go on and on.
Like at some level, the boycotts are kind of dumb, aren't they? Like you don't even know what you're like. At 100,000 feet, you know what you're protesting. But the reality is that most, like at 50,000 or 30 or 20,000 feet, you may be actually working against yourself because, like, you just.
I'm a bit over the booing of the anthems, to be honest. I think it's a bit much at this point. I just watched a game the other night that was in Vancouver, and they were booing the American anthem, and I just thought, okay, like, come on, let's move on.
Yeah,
run its course. Well, it's been a lot of fun. Really appreciate everybody. Thank you so much, Kelvin. Have yourself a great weekend.
Thank you. Everyone else as well. Take care.
Lyndsey, enjoy counting all your lamb money.
Thanks. And it is my daughter's 17th birthday tomorrow, so happy birthday to her.
She is 17?
I know. I was 15 when I had her. I'm just kidding. I wasn't, but yeah, 17.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about to have all three of my kids in the 20s.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sean actually was 15 when he had his.
And Kelvin had a 13-year-old.
And Kelvin has a 13-year-old this week.
A teenager in our household as of this week. Yeah. So yeah,
it's crazy.
We're not getting any older.
If any of you need a reprieve, you can always come to my house. No children here. Just saying.
I'm going to go hang out
for the weekend.
Yeah.
Well,
hang out with your cat.
I'm going to prove that I still have all of my youth, Lyndsey, and I'm going to play pickleball tomorrow.
Oh my God.
Limbered up, ready to go.
Okay, I was going to say, please stretch. Okay.
Which age category, John?
I'm playing against my wife, which is an easy target. I'll take it.
She doesn't listen to this show.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
take no mercy, Trish. Yeah. Take no mercy.
I'm going to play left-handed or something.
Secretly, she's been taking lessons. Yeah, she's been taking lessons, and she's going to just absolutely.
I've been trying to tell her, take lessons. Exactly.
Yeah,
I love pickleball. It's a lot of fun. Meagan, have yourself a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good chat ratio on sports this time around. I appreciate it.
No, that could have been more. Hey, everybody, send an email to shaney@realagriculture.com. Keep the feedback coming. It was a great week of feedback. Love the emails pouring in. Really do appreciate it. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. And make sure you check out realagriculture.com over the weekend and subscribe to our daily emails, realagriculture.com/subscribe. Thanks so much for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Cheers, everybody.